uh, many people, have this whole, when we talk of wildlife, when we talk of nature, when we talk of environment, or, people are hooked on to things that move, people are hooked on to things that react, people are hooked on to things that run, kill, hunt. And easily, whenever you are on a safari ride to Bandhavgarh or to Ranthambore and stuff, the most neglected part of the jungle is the forest, or is the plant world itself. Well, it is easier, to neglect it, but the thing is that whatever is around us is standing on the basis of this plant world. And there is, to a curious eye, there is a lot more that plants can offer in terms of action, in terms of drama, in terms of all kinds of interesting behavior, if you have the interest to look for. For me personally, it is a great, I like plants more because they don't run, because they stand at one place. I don't need to chase them. And all life forms, whether it is the insects or the birds or whether it is animals, they all are coming to the plants. So nobody, basically, all life will gravitate towards wherever the plants are. And when we talk of heritage, uh, the plants are, of course, the biggest part of our heritage, that and they have been around here for, at least the modern plants I'm talking about, are at least 500 million years old. And it's a very important aspect of our living heritage. They don't, the most important part of it is that they just don't survive, but they have enabled us and a lot of other animals to survive and to do what they are doing, and to do what we are doing. Okay, 500 million years. That's a big time span. When we, when I read about plants, when I do go about, referencing, when I go about researching for my own interest, I often come to a question where basically I'm scared as to how much plants know about the world and how much plants know about human beings themselves. It's quite astounding and sometimes very scary to see how plants are manipulating or just surviving, using all of us. Okay, but in this 500 million year history of plants, it's only around 100 million years ago when when a lot of action suddenly happened, because flowers came into picture. Till then, the flowers were not really there, and with flowers, there was a niche that opened up for insects, for birds, for everybody who sought resources like nectar and pollen grains. Before that, they were not really available, but about 100 million years ago, that's when flowering plants appeared and they spread, and we started, seeing a lot of action when in terms of insect evolution. Okay, uh, this is probably how the world looked about 65 odd million years ago. This is today the Karst plateau, filled with, right now if you go there, you will see it is swamped with all kinds of flowers. Every week probably new flowering takes place, the color keeps on changing. But this is what, probably, if you go down 65 million years ago, most of the land looked like this. Okay, and around 35 or million years ago, the grasses evolved, and the grasses really changed the game. Okay, because when it comes to the grasses, the productivity quotient comes into picture. If you When you see this landscape, everybody must have been familiar with this landscapes through Discovery Channel and through, this is the typical African savanna. No trees, or very barely any trees standing, but the amount of wildlife or amount of life that these treeless plains support is astounding. That's a big difference when it comes to, Western Ghats, and, the popular wildlife destinations around India. Basically, Western Ghats, you have lots of forest, dense forest, lots of tree growth, but very little grasses. And the wildlife diversity exists, but the densities don't exist. So it's very difficult to see wildlife. Okay, it's very difficult to see even deers. It's very difficult to see, forget, tigers and stuff. But the moment you step onto a grassland like Corbett, Kaziranga, or Kanha, the amount of life around you, or the number of animals that you see, it's much higher. And grasses basically are the reason for all, you know, survival, especially when it comes to humans, because practically almost everything that we eat, whether it's the rice, whether wheat, or whether jawar, or whether sugar cane, or whatever, these are all grasses. Okay, these are all of them are grasses, and it's very, very, a highlight when it comes to ensuring food availability. Okay, uh, but of course we are not, going to talk about this. The main aspect of plant evolution, or the evolution of life itself on this planet, was the evolution of this molecule called chlorophyll. This one molecule that enables the plants to trap sun's energy and to transfer it into everybody who wants to seek it below them. The molecule, the green molecule, chlorophyll, it gives the plants their green colors. Of course, before chlorophyll evolved, the chlorophyll molecule evolved, there were other molecules that were also present, which are of similar lineage. But this one molecule, chlorophyll, is what is a very big highlight for evolution of life. Okay, and to look at chlorophyll in a, you know, to look at life in a in a cellular way or in a molecular way, it's very interesting, because when you see these two molecules next to each other, these two molecules, whether it's the hemoglobin or the chlorophyll, these molecules perform the same role. They are oxygen carriers. They transport oxygen from one place to another, and they are not different. They are almost identical except for one chain of atoms attached to it. And when we study the synthesis of chlorophyll or the synthesis of hemoglobin, in our in our colleges, almost still about 80% of the synthesis, the process is the same. Only at one point it comes and it diverges, and the difference is basically whether it's the iron that gets attached in the center or the magnesium that it gets attached in the center. Okay, that's the only difference. So if you go to the molecular level, there is very little to differentiate plants from animals. Again, when we come to this particular slide or this particular molecule, and try to, focus on the fact that whenever we lose blood, whenever we lose hemoglobin, might be because of an injury, might be because of an illness or something, it causes immense pain. And when I look at this similarities, it's not too difficult for us to gauge that plants, of course, must be in a lot of pain when they lose chlorophyll. It is not something that plants, are ready to lose. It's something that is very important to plants, as important as the molecule of hemoglobin is to the animals. Okay, and a lot of plant evolution is all about stopping or avoiding the loss of chlorophyll, about protecting oneself from the animals that would otherwise have eat them. If we when we talk of a prey predator relationship, we have a deer and a tiger which comes into a picture immediately. But this picture is also a prey predator relationship, where the prey is the plant and the predator is the giraffe, and all that the plant is been doing for the last so many years is to try and run away from the giraffe. Okay, at one point, when you extrapolate on this picture, it is also an highlight as to the reason why giraffes evolved at long necks. Okay, so plants are driving evolution also at the same time. If you look at this picture, the elephants there in the background, they are hardly any size. Okay, so what all this tree has been doing is to run away from the giraffe, is to avoid being eaten by the giraffe. And if you look at an evolutionary tipping point, the giraffe is at an evolutionary tipping point. Okay, it can neither eat the plants comfortably, nor it can eat the grass below and under its feet comfortably with that long neck. Interestingly, the number of vertebrae in the neck of the giraffe and in the human neck or in the other animal's neck is the same. It's just the size of the vertebrae that has got magnified, and not additional vertebrae have been added. Okay, so plants, while they have been making a survival for themselves, they have also been driving out evolution. multitude of strategies. Plants can't move; they are rooted at one place. That makes it easy to perceive that they might be defenseless. But then plants have worked up all kinds of defenses. All kinds of defenses. They get physical. They get lethal often. With a simple blade of grass. Most of us must have tried in the school times to move your fingers over the blade of grass, and you often get cut because the grass the surface of the grass is embedded with glass pieces. There is silica crystals embedded on the surface, which are not meant to cut your fingers, but they are actually meant to go into your jaws, go into the gums, and injure any herbivore trying to feed on the grass. Okay, therefore they limit the amount of grass that any herbivore can eat. Okay, it's under the microscope, the crystals will look like this. They are very inconspicuous to a naked eye, but under a microscope, even under a simple microscope, they are easily visible. And this is not something that plants have been doing in response to deer. If you look at the dino fossils, especially the herbivore dinos, in their jaws, they found these same crystals embedded. So plants were treating the dinosaurs in the same way that they are treating the goat and the deer and the buffalo and cows today. Okay. It is, difficult to imagine, but silica is the most common mineral available in the soil. It is available right on the surface of the soil. So it is not difficult for plants to source silica. They just have to pick it up from the soil and put it up on their surface and put it to use. There's one very interesting study that happened in India, which basically triggered my fascination on plants. And this was in the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve in southern India, where there was a group of researchers who were looking at what do langurs eat, Hanuman langur, the one that you see in your picture. What do they eat throughout the year in the forest? We all basically, everybody knew that langurs eat a lot of leaves, but then the quantification and the quality of leaves that they eat was a matter of study. So there were people who were going out into the forest for a phenomenally long time, and the whole thing that they were doing was collecting langur feces, collecting langur cats, waiting in the bushes, surrounded with elephants, tigers, bisons, all kinds of gores, all kinds of creatures. But their focus was on a troop of langur and to go out and collect the poop whenever anyone pooped. Okay, and this poop was basically then taken back to lab where it was analyzed. And what we came to know, the first thing was basically that throughout the year, langurs feed on about 90 different species of trees in the forest. Okay, so that's what langurs require to survive, 90 different species of trees. Okay, the another thing that came into picture was that langurs basically, when they started feeding, they settled into one area, they started feeding off on the leaves, and after some time they moved from that area into another area. The movement was very surprising because in some cases, the movement of these langurs from the original feeding area to the next feeding area was as big as 13 kilometers. Okay, so the displacement from one area to another area, feeding grounds, basically they were in a forest. They were surrounded by plants all over. So the langurs could have easily moved to the next area available, but then sometimes the displacement was huge, about 13 kilometers. And this prompted basically further inquiry into why do these langurs first of all move, and second question was why do they move so far. So when basically the plants were looked at again, what they found out that once a langur started feeding on them, the plants started turning themselves into some sort of poisonous food material. They started turning toxic. The leaves started getting a lot of toxins discharged into them, which makes it impossible for langurs to digest them, difficult for them to digest. Okay, and that's what forced the langurs to move from that area. But then why were they moving so far? That was another interesting question that arose from it. And what was found out that while langurs were feeding on one area and the plants in reply were producing toxins to fight them off, plants in the neighboring areas had already started building up their toxins, anticipating the langurs movement to them. So there was something that the plants that were being impacted were communicating out to the other plants that, guys, watch out for these creatures. Once they get done with us, they might move on to you. And these plants had already built up their defenses. Okay, so this was one of the first instances when uh, we get to know that plants can actually communicate, okay, with each other, and distance doesn't really bother them too much. Okay, just about some years back, it was basically shown as to how do plants communicate, how do plants have a huge network of communication under the ground with their roots and with the fungi. We know now that plants not only communicate, but plants also share nutrition with each other. Okay, if there is a sick plant in the community, an infected plant, then other plants do rush in food portions and stuff to that plant to help it survive. Okay, it was a work of fiction before, but now we know that this is how plants work. They have been communicating, and it it's it's fascinating. Like when I saw the movie Avatar, and all those roots going lighting up and all those things that they showed, it was a work of fiction even then. Okay, but now we know that plants are actually doing this with the help of fungi, and that opens up a big, Pandora's box as to how much communications are going around and underneath. Well, communication often for the human realm means about sight and sound, okay, but plants take it to a different level altogether. And that's why whenever we talk of disturbing a forest or cutting down a few trees, we're not just taking down some individuals, we are affecting a community. Okay, and that's what needs to be ingrained, that it's not just about everything. The interconnectedness of this whole of the whole landscape is very, very important. Well, the amount of toxins that plants produce, they can go to some ridiculous levels. Okay, and the plants do get very nasty. There was this case in Hyderabad some years back where a lawyer died after drinking Loki ka juice. And the funny part or the absurd part of it, the case basically, his wife was targeted by the law because they thought she had poisoned him, but it was not the wife, it was the Loki that had done the job of poisoning the lawyer. The Loki ka juice was not fresh, and it came to him after a long period. Until then, till that time, the juice had turned toxic enough to kill that person. Okay, and that's what plants can do many a times. Even if when you eat a bitter cucumber, sometimes you get a bitter taste in the cucumber. That is not because of anything but it's because of a goat, or it's because of a cow that has gone on to feed that cucumber leaves, and in response to that, the plants turn themselves bitter, they turn themselves toxic. Okay, and that's the reason why we avoid eating those bitter cucumbers, because they can get nasty if you eat too much of them. Okay, of course, once that once that leaf eater has gone, once that impact has reduced, the toxins also get washed down. So after some time, the plant is again edible. That cucumbers are again edible. Okay, the best example of this is the caterpillars of butterflies, especially the monarchs, the tigers, the crows. These guys, they are called as poison eaters because they use these plant poisons. They borrow poisons from the plants. The poisons somehow don't affect the caterpillars, but the caterpillars then further use these poisons for their self-defense. Okay, so they borrow protection from the plants, and they use this plant that basically the caterpillar is feeding, can easily kill a human being with about 8 grams of its root powder. But the butterflies are happily feeding on it, and they are not only just uh, digesting it, but they are storing it in their body for their adult stage and use as protection. And importantly, butterflies prefer to announce the poisons, which plants don't prefer to announce. Butterflies prefer to announce those poisons to the birds. So whenever when a human being thinks of a butterfly as a pretty butterfly, colorful butterfly flying around, the birds might be just saying, "Yuck, this is not the stuff that I want to eat." It's at very interestingly, the use of the poison in the insects is very judiciously and wisely controlled. That's another topic that basically scientists are looking at, that naturalists are looking at, because uh, the birds or the lizards or the anybody who eats these caterpillars, they don't die. They of course sort of go through a lot of pain, they go through a lot of trouble, but they don't end up dying. And what we think it is, basically what the butterflies are doing is that they are making sure that the bird goes through a lot of trouble, but it lives to tell the tale to other birds that don't eat these guys. Otherwise, you will have a situation where for every one butterfly dead, there will be one bird dead. But only when that information is passed on to the chicks, to the other birds that don't eat these guys, these are not edible, or these are troublemakers, then only that is only when the butterflies will actually be helped. Okay, so it is very interesting how these have co-evolved. Okay, and how often they have leveraged on each other's evolution. These are two plants from very commonly found in Mumbai. One is wounds, the red seeds that you see, Abrus precatorius. That name itself is, precator. Um, these are a group of toxins, basically, which are called precatorins, which are known to put an abrupt end to life. Four of these seeds grounded are good enough to kill a human being, but the leaves are edible. Almost all of us who have eaten a pan have eaten these leaves, because these leaves, the dried leaves, go into the pan, what we call the hari patti. So while the leaves are edible, the seeds are not edible at all. Okay, if you eat the seed whole, it will just pass through your system. So unless you want to try it out, you have to powder it and then eat it. Okay, it is designed to pass whole through your system. The other plant, what you see again without any leaves, is the khujli. Okay, the notorious Khujli plant. The pods are covered with microscopic fine hair, which can be hugely irritating. Okay, very bad itch. Most of us might have tried it out on somebody else, especially when in the college days and stuff. In both these cases, what the plant is making sure is that while the leaves are being eaten off by animals, the plants are sending out a very clear message that leave aside our children. Yeah, maternal care or child care is something which, again, human beings boast about themselves. The best that we can do is send our children to creches, or if not creches, to schools. So to make sure that they don't trouble you at home. But plants go a long way in making sure, and they are ready to kill. Okay, to protect their babies. So, well, one of my mathematics professor, he basically used to tell us that everything in the world is about mathematics, about the numbers. And plants also do a lot of mathematics, especially when it comes to growing up against gravity, go standing in the face of wind, rain, all kinds of things that are not supporting the fact that the plant has to grow up. Okay, and it is not something that we knew, that we know now, but Leonardo da Vinci suggested this about 500 years ago, that plants do a lot of calculations. Okay, the cumulative, if you add all these branches together and make them into one circular unit, then the girth of the plant will be uniform from bottom to top. Okay, this was refined, and what we know now, that plants use what we call as, which is an architectural term, fractals, shapes that repeat themselves. Okay, and this is what basically means that plants uh, ramify themselves. They stabilize their center of gravity so that wind, gravity, doesn't pull them down. They have enough resistance. A lesson, especially for all the municipalities, when they go about chopping their trees, on the roads in a very haphazard manner. Often, in name of chopping, what we essentially do is basically disturb the plant and make sure it falls the next time around. Okay, it is the plants use their branches as counterbalances. They stabilize themselves, and the moment you chop off the branches in an haphazard manner, you what we make sure is that plants will fall down. Okay, so the fractals was another. Now we know that plants are using maths. Okay, maths plants use in a lot of different ways. Okay, even to make sure that they produce enough food during summer months when the sunlight periods are longer, and in the winter months when the sunlight periods are shorter. Plants use a lot of calculations to make sure that they have enough food. At the same time, they consume enough food so that they have a reservoir of food also with them necessary. Okay, a bee to make basically 1 tablespoon of honey, that is about what it does in one day, will visit about 4,000 flowers. Okay, that is not because the bee is very industrious and the bee loves to work and stuff, but it is because the plants are making it do that. Okay, the amount of nectar that each flower holds is something which is pre-decided. Plants decide how much amount of nectar will each flower hold, so that the bee who comes to the flower is interested in it but is not satisfied by it. And this whole act of flying from one flower to another is energy consuming enough to make sure that from one flower to another flower, the bee has consumed all the energy that she has acquired from the first flower. At the end of the day, the bee will be as hungry as it was at the start of the day. And the worker bees, I don't like using that term, but worker bees are, they have a very little adult lifespan. At the most, they will survive for a week and they will die because of sheer wear and tear. Many a times when you go under beehives to look for the remnants of bees, you will find all their wings and stuff shed and dead bees lying around because they have been overworked, by the plants. Okay, so these are not the bosses that anybody would want. You have to work weekends, you don't get your pay on time, or even if you get, plants are vicious when it comes to bosses. Okay, they can get the work done out of almost everybody, and they basically hold no guilt for doing what they are doing. On the right or on the left of the screen, this tall flower, lamp like flower, this is called a fly trap. Okay, it's very common in Sanjay Gandhi National Park. Also in the monsoons we see this flower. This fly trap basically traps insects. Okay, insects enter through this slit, they go down this tube and they get trapped in this bulb kind of a thing, because that is where a lot of food is available. Okay, but the flower doesn't do anything further to the insect, it just holds them captive for a few days. And when the flower dries up, when the flower wilts, the insect is again free to go. It comes through as quite a sadistic act. But from the flower's logic, what the flower is trying to do, that while it provides insect with all food that it requires, the flower also makes sure that the insect doesn't go and waste its pollen grains socializing, which anybody would do on a stomach, on a filled up stomach. So the flower holds the insect captive, kidnaps it, holds it till it is hungry again, and the insect gets released. The only thing on the insect's mind is to go into another flower and get trapped again over there. Okay, so there is no room for the insect to go around, waste the pollen grains on things where they are not supposed to land. It's very interesting how they ensure the end-to-end delivery. When it comes of logistics, plants have a lot of lessons to teach us. If you see the mistletoe plant, I don't know how many of you have ever seen a mistletoe flower. there is a the mistletoe grows on other trees. It's a facultative parasite. It grows on other trees, very common in the forest. The berries are fed upon by a bird called as the thick-billed flower pecker or the pale-billed flower pecker. They feed on the berries, and while they excrete those berries, okay, the byproduct comes out is basically the seeds become very sticky and they get lodged onto the anal opening of the bird, not easy to dislodge them. So the bird has to, rub its bum on a tree branch to dislodge the seeds. And that is how basically this plant will again find a right place for it to grow and parasitize. Okay, it won't drop off anywhere on the ground or any random place. It will basically make sure that the bird goes there and rubs its bum on a tree, not on a rock and stuff, because it then selects also those particular birds that will only go from one tree to another tree, not go around flying here and there randomly. Okay, the flower on the right of the screen is not an Indian flower, but it is found in the temperate region. This is the bee orchid. We have a different bee orchid in India in Sanjay Gandhi National Park also. That bee orchid doesn't do all the stuff that these guys do. These bee orchids are notorious, and they are, if it was in the human realm, if this would have happened, then, what these bee orchids do is that they resemble bees, not physically, but chemically. They produce the same hormones or pheromones that a female bee will produce to attract the male bee. Okay, and chemical signals are something that nobody can allude to. You may be the Vishwamitra, but the moment the Cupid strikes, you have to go, all your tapasya goes into waste and you end up there. So that's what happens with the male bees. They go here, they do the flowers, try to mate with the flower, thinking of it as the female. They get unsuccessful. They might be disappointed, but by the time they decide to leave one flower, the other flower is already calling them with their pheromones. So, in the hope of finding love, these male bees will end up pollinating these flowers. And it is quite a sad scene, you're manipulating somebody for sex. Okay, this is not something that would be acceptable in human realm at all. Okay, but flowers are doing this. They openly do this. As a naturalist, the most important or the important question here to ask ourselves is, where is the interface where the flower and the bee meet and decide, okay, what is your pheromone? Let me try out that pheromone. I will copy you. Where is that table of discussion? That basically this mixing and matching happens. Okay, and this is where basically it gets very, very interesting and very, very frightening, because this plant knows what is happening in the balls of the bees. Okay, which is something very weird for us to imagine. Okay, it knows so much that it can manipulate the bee on something as basic as sex. Well, I come to especially the work that I am doing in Sanjay Gandhi National Park with the fig trees. Okay, now this is a game, basically a relation, a tango that goes on between the plant and the insect. And this has been going around for at least 90 million years now. The figs and the fig wasp, they both are locked with each other, okay, into this game of survival. Okay, figs essentially means any anjeer, which it may be the banyan, it may be the peepal, it may be the umber, the gulair, as we commonly call it. These are the most common anjeer fig trees that we find. In Sanjay Gandhi National Park, we find about 19 different kinds of species of fig trees. Okay, they are pollinated by this insect. It is called a fig wasp. Each species of fig has its own fig wasp. Okay, so it's like it's very strictly regulated. It's like a lock and key mechanism. One fig wasp cannot go and pollinate other fig tree randomly. Okay, they are made for each other. So as many species of figs, that many species of fig wasps have to be there. Okay, the female is the winged creature, while the male has got no wings. The male essentially is born inside the fig and it dies inside the fig. It doesn't know the world outside of the fig. Okay. So next time you eat a fig, just think of all these things. Okay. Rohan Chakravarti, the brilliant guy who does the green cartoons. Okay. For one of my article, I worked with him to get this cartoon strip made, and we will just run through these. You know. So, like I said, the figs are basically pollinated by only one particular insect. Okay. In Indian culture, many a times people tell us that, oh, figs are very, those who see a fig flower are the most luckiest people on the planet, because the gods are happy with them and stuff. But it's not the case. The fig essentially, the what we eat is actually a collection of flowers where the basal tissue has grown up and encapsulated the flowers within it. So when you open the fig, all the filaments that you see are actually individual flowers. Thousands of flowers are packed inside the fig, and that's what locks up the figs from other pollinators. So no birds can access it, no butterflies can access it, nobody can access it, because the flowers are enclosed, completely enclosed. There is no way that other insects can get through it. Okay, it's only the fig wasp that can enter the fig, that too at a particular time, okay, in its development. And once it enters the fig wasp, there is no way out. The fig wasp will be locked inside the fig. Okay. um, the female wasp will enter the fig at one particular stage. Okay. Once she enters, she will die inside after completing her role. Okay. uh, what she has done before is, from a fig that she came out from, she has carried pollen grains with her. She will enter this fig, she will go and pollinate some flowers inside, and she will lay her eggs on other flowers. That interesting important step of pollinating a few flowers is necessary because the fig has to ripe so that her babies can get food. Okay, so she fertilizes the fig, she onsets the ripening of it, and lays her eggs on the other flowers, so kind of parasitizes the other flowers. So, and it is timed. By the time her young ones are out, the figs have started ripening. The young ones have a lot of food to consume. All the development of the young ones happen inside the fig. Okay. uh, there is no connection to the outside world right now. Nothing. All the young ones will come out, they will feed on the fig itself. They will molt, they will pupate. From the pupa, the male and the female, the boy and the girl, will again emerge, and they will do their socializing inside the fig itself. So all the socializing that has to be done, all the courtship displays and power plays, everything happens inside that fig. And at the end of it, basically the male will cut open a small opening on the fig for the female to fly out. Okay. And the male will die inside the fig. If you take out the male and put it in sunlight, then about in 3 minutes the male will die because of desiccation. Okay. The female is not made like that. The female can fly. uh, Nobody's sure of how much distance they can fly, but there have been instances where studies, especially there was one study done in the southernmost tip of India, where uh, you know thin plastic sheets were put up about the forest canopy, 40 meters from the ground, and to collect whatever comes in from the sea. And in that plastic membranes, fig wasps from Africa were found. Okay, getting stuck. Most probably it was the wind that was carrying them, but the fig wasps emerge uh, from one fig. They, at this particular time when the fig wasp is about to emerge from the fig, the male flowers inside the fig are active. Okay, the female flowers were active when the previous fig wasp entered that fig. so the pollination was possible. Now the male flowers are active, so the fig wasp, voluntarily or involuntarily, she collects a lot of pollen grains on her body. Some fig wasp species do it purposely. They have specialized organs to collect the pollen grains. Other just walk through a lot of male flowers and get dusted with the pollen grains. Okay, so and the female will go on and look for another figs that are developing. Now there comes an interesting question over here, basically, as to if this cycle has to go on, then there it has to be ensured that there is some or the other fig flowering at any given point of the year in any landscape. Okay, so that the fig wasp will find another fig, which means that figs are aseasonal. They are, apart from being aseasonal, in addition to being aseasonal, they are asynchronous. Okay, so you may have in your garden two same fig trees, same banyan trees, or same people trees, two people trees. One is fruiting, other is not fruiting. Okay, which is what the figs do. They stagger their fruiting so that the fig wasps also have a reason to survive. So while mangoes and grapes and all kinds of fruits are seasonal, figs are aseasonal. At any given time in the forest, some or the other fig is available, which is very, very important when it comes to maintaining the food stability. Okay. One another point when we talk of climate change, when we talk of global warming, how global warming is threatening us from all different aspects and avenues. What we know that basically with every 4-degree rise in temperature, the life of the fig wasp is reduced by 50%. The adult lifespan of the fig wasp is reduced by 50%. So when we raise temperatures of this planet, we will ensure that fig wasps don't reach their targeted fig trees, and it will be having a cascading effect on a lot of other things. Okay, so global warming doesn't really mean that ice is going to melt and sea levels will rise and that will be the end of it. Global warming will hit us from all different directions that we don't even know about, and fig wasps are just one thing that we know that this is happening with them. Okay, well, right within the nick of the time, the female fig wasp has found another fig in the right stage of development, and she will continue with her business now. She will enter it, she will die, her progeny will come, do all these things inside the fig, fly out to the next tree. And this asynchronous and aseasonal fruiting basically has worked magic. 1,200 vertebrates around the world are known to feed exclusively on fig tree. That term exclusively is very important, which points out to more than 80% of their food intake is fig, because they are, and we are not just talking of India, we are talking of all the tropical regions of the world. Okay, or whether it's Australia, whether it's South America, whether it's Africa, it's the figs who are basically, ruling the whole scene. Okay, it's one of the most diverse group of trees with more than 900 species known. Okay, and this, just because of the fig trees, about 1,200 different kinds of vertebrates are finding their food. Okay, which is quite a large, staggering number. Okay? We are talking of exclusive feeders. There are, of course, others who come to eat figs, on and off. They don't feed on it too much. Okay, and to wrap up the session, basically, I always want to dwell on this thing, that intelligence and brain, whenever we talk of plant intelligence, whenever we talk of animal intelligence, it somehow always human beings come on the top, and other creatures don't ever stand a chance. Okay, but it probably is a very unintelligent thing to say that intelligence is only because of the size of the brain, and it's related to one organ. Like urine is a product of kidneys, intelligence definitely doesn't need to be a product of one particular organ, especially when it comes to plants. We know that these guys are doing some of the most awesome things, some of the most coolest things, and that too without any organ like a brain or a neuron or whatever. So it's a one thing is for sure, whether, the pandemic or whatever disasters and stuff, this 2020 has been a very bad year, but plants will stay. These guys have seen all kinds of things happening around them. They saw, you know, dinosaurs evolve, they saw dinosaurs go out. They will probably, in all possible, then see us go out as well. Okay. Uh, well, on that note, I will end my talk. If there is any questions that we need to that I can take, I will try my best to answer some questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shardul. I have to tell you that you had everyone enthralled. It was a beautiful talk. And I do have questions from people and a lot of appreciation. To begin with, I think that you shook all of us when you talked about how plants have been manipulating the humans. I think you just set such a right tone with that, because it really put so many other things in perspective. I do have a question here from Farooq. He's asking us about how the Venus flytrap evolved. You did mention another flytrap, but
Yes.
defense mechanism? Is it a self-preservation technique? Is it a feeding technique, or is it meanness? So if you could, just...
It is a feeding technique. Basically, insectivorous plants. The flytrap that I talked about is not an insectivore. It doesn't kill the insect, but the Venus flytraps traps and feeds on the insect. That is basically to that comes from a response of a soil which has very less nitrogen content in it. Okay, and to augment that supply of nitrogen, insectivorous plants evolved into what they have evolved. Basically, blood has got a lot of nitrogen. Okay, proteins are another important source of it. So that's where basically, so wherever the insectivorous plants are found, either the soil cover is very less, that is on rocky outcrops. Even in Sanjay Gandhi National Park, on top of the Canary Mountains, we find bladderworts, which are insectivorous plants. But even again, when you go to the northeast where the flytraps are found and stuff, the soils have very low nitrogen content. And in response of that, plants evolved multiple strategies. Like some plants evolved bacteria on their roots to help and fix atmospheric nitrogen, like what the legumes do. Okay, the insectivorous plants decided to do it more actively and go out and kill somebody and get their nitrogen. By the way, I can't show you, but there is a pitcher plant in my house, which yeah, so it's very commonly available nowadays in Mumbai, in the nurseries.
So is it keeping mosquitoes at bay?
I do find a lot of mosquito skeletons floating inside that pitcher. So it is doing what it's supposed to do.
So I also remember reading somewhere, you were talking about the bitterness of plants, and I remember reading somewhere that, bitter almonds as well are a protection for the plant, right? But if humans consume a number of 60 bitter almonds, they can die at one go. They can die.
Yes.
But there is a question about bitter cucumbers also. Is it a truth, or is it an old wives' tale that if you chop the ends of the cucumber, it will not taste bitter?
I think it's something that the vine is passing around. Okay, because it is basically born from the plant. Right. The cucumber by itself cannot make itself bitter, but the plant basically on which it is born, if the plant goes through some injury because of a predator, in response to that, it will release the battery of toxins, which will result in bitter cucumbers. Okay. By the way, the most richest source of cyanide is apple seeds.
Right.
So, those who get...
must not consume too many of them.
Many of them, yeah.
Dr. Kelkar has an interesting observation. He said that the gunja is very poisonous, but fortunately what we have commonly available in Mumbai is Ratan Gunj, which resembles Adenanthera pavonina.
Yes.
Yeah, and he's also mentioned that Mucuna pruriens is used in Parkinson's disease and is also an aphrodisiac for whoever it may interest.
Yes, so these two, basically there is no similarity between the gunj and the Ratan Gunj. One is a big tree, other is a very small climber.
It's a
Okay,
climber.
it's a climber. And Gunj is a wild plant. Adenanthera, mostly if you go around Malabar Hill, you will find lots of them planted over there. The
Okay.
ground is scattered with the seeds and the seeds there. But what we are talking about is the Aberus precatorius, the Gunj, not the other one, the big tree.
Is that the ratti that comes out of it?
Rati, yeah, Rati. The seeds are called Rati.
The
So
seeds are the
Rati, Barsona,
same weight.
whatever it is.
All the
Yes,
seeds are supposed to have the same weight.
yes.
Okay. So there's a lot of compliments for the graphics that you have shown us, Rohan Chakravarti's, right? So there's a lot of
Yes.
praise for them and for your talk. And someone has also asked about whether you have a written story or text for the relationship between fig and fig wasp. But before you answer, when you went off, I was I remembered an incident where I remember reading that many, many years before the discovery of a particular wasp, a particular fig tree was studied, and it had a really long curvature to reach the inside of the fig. And biologists then said that somewhere on this planet there will exist a wasp which we don't yet know about, with a particularly long and curved axis into the. I thought that was just fascinating that you could
So I will just correct you
hmm.
slightly. It was not a fig and a wasp.
Oh, it was not a
It
fig
was it was a flower, and the person who said this was Darwin,
star.
Charles Darwin. And
Okay.
by looking at the long style of the flower,
Hmm.
the what Darwin said, that there has to be some moth
Hmm.
that pollinates this flower, and that moth has to have. So basically, we have something called as the elephant hawk moth in Mumbai. Okay,
Yes.
in the monsoons it is very common.
Yeah.
That hawk moth, the body measurement, the size of the body is about 3 centimeters from the tip of the head to the tip of the abdomen. But the proboscis, the
Proboscis.
feeding apparatus, the straw-like feeding apparatus that butterflies and moths have, the proboscis of that moth measures up to 20 centimeters.
It's a particularly long proboscis.
Yes, particularly long proboscis to enter tubular flowers. And by habit, the hawk moths never sit on the flowers like butterflies do. So
Overs.
they will fly about, hover about, and throw their proboscis, project it inside the flowers to feed off on them. Okay, so that's what basically in South America, Darwin saw that, and he said that there has to be some pollinator that has evolved.
Hmm.
But it was only some years later that actually that whole thing actually was discovered and said.
Some of these stories and the whole story about the whole discovery of mycorrhiza, which helped the roots communicate with each other.
Communicate.
You're absolutely right. It really seems like we live in a even more fascinating world, more fascinating than Avatar itself.
Yes.
So it's absolutely. Thank you so much for opening our eyes to this world that surrounds us. Some more compliments from Anjali and Lakshmi and Sneha for a brilliant lecture and for introducing children to this wonderful world. Dr. Ashish Kelkar has asked whether these fig wasps would be present for all ficus trees like fig, umber, banyan, people. I
Yes.
guess,
Each has their own fig wasps.
as they keep saying that if one of these, either the figs were to die or the wasp were to die, the plant or the other one would also
Yes. Or die.
would also die.
Yeah.
Okay, that was short and sweet, and that was brilliant. Thank you so much, Shardul, and thank you all of you for being a wonderful audience and for your well justified compliments for his presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.